Yo, what it do, 2K fans? This your boy JuKING the Boss, and if you haven't noticed it, if you haven't heard the news in the 2K community, and you need to brace yourself, there's no skill gap in NBA 2K. Now, I know some of you are probably like, yeah, we knew that for the past few years. But let's talk about why there's no skill gap. As much as over the past few years, 2K dev team has worked to try and implement one and try to make it even, more difficult for us as gamers, as players to get better at the game. They try to make it a challenge. There's a couple of things that they didn't do, and I feel that we're going to touch up on one of them in extensive matter. So first of all, look at it like this. They've been limiting developmental caps, creating archetype systems, and then subsequently dual archetype systems, changing difficulty sliders, introducing rewards system for shooting before immediately removing that same system, creating an advanced control scheme for dribbling and shooting, and even a risk reward system for the use of chain dribbling. So the stamina drain risk versus the creating space reward. With these improvements, whether they're good or bad over the past few years, were designed to create a skill gaps. But what they didn't take into consideration was there is one area that they have to focus on to create the skills gap that they want in the game: sliders. So there's a lot to go over. Grab your popcorn, open your ears, because here's where the skills gap is ultimately going to start at. So in the past, the skill gap, well, no, not skills gap, but the skill. So difficulty sliders were used to beef up the CPU in any game, every game, whether it was a setting that you can adjust or not, varied based on the developer of the game and how much control they wanted the user to have to changing up these sliders. But those, they were literally there to just beef up how tough the computer is. And then games started adding in more penalizing handicaps for harder difficulties. And I'll give you an example. Back in the day, if you played Mortal Kombat, you had the tournament ladder. And in that tournament ladder, you could effectively just play against tougher and tougher computers. And so when you look at it like playing against players, I could find myself in a tournament where I'll play some subpar competition. And each level, that competition will be better than the last level. So the first person I play against probably don't even use the blocking scheme in a fighting game. And so I'm just going to wail on them. Counter, wail on them, wail on them. Every time they try to throw a punch, counter, block, wail on them, wail on them. Just use their stamina against them. Okay, cool. And then as I went up in levels, the competition got harder, which means that you're gonna have players using block a little more effectively. So in Mortal Kombat, you had computers using block more effectively, using combos more effectively, and chaining moves together more effectively. Now, when you look at it, a lot of games do things like this, where not only are they going to make the computer tougher, so they'll give the computer more health, they'll make the computer hit harder, but they also make your hits less and give you less health. To me, that's not increasing the difficulty in the base sense. That is adding a new layer to it. So I call that a challenge. In any game, I would say, okay, if this is challenge mode, then okay, there are certain parameters and added parameters to the challenge that you have to overcome. But when it comes down to general difficulty, where the rules of the game don't change, but the skill is based on difficulty sliders. And when it comes down to difficulty sliders, when they do these increases for the computer to make it easier for them to shoot, and then they do these decreases for the player, making it harder for them to shoot, you're not really creating a skills gap across the community. What you're doing is creating a challenge in just my career games. So let's break down why sports fail there and how can 2K become like a leader on the forefront of creating that better balance. Now, so first of all, let's look at this. They need to truly separate CPU sliders. Now, the reason why I feel they need to separate it, because you might find yourself in a My Career game and you're out on the court and all of your teammates are literally useless. So I play for New Orleans in one of my careers, and Anthony Davis, who is a standout, superstar, he has all the tools. He gets bodied by even the worst power forward, the worst center. Like in a mismatch advantage, I've seen him get beat by guards with no defensive ability. And you look at that and say, well, that's not realistic at all. If I see Anthony Davis get matched up with Steph Curry because of a pick and roll switch, Okay, I'm gonna feed Anthony Davis, and in reality, he's gonna body Steph Curry in the paint, and somebody's gonna have to step over to help him cover himself up. But if it's a one-on-one thing, I'm gonna pick Anthony Davis in that post all the time, right? Now, here's where I find the problem with that. If they don't separate those CPU sliders, effectively playing a Hall of Fame difficulty becomes more of a chore, because the players on your team are affected by user sliders. They're not affected by CPU sliders. So when they boost up the effect that a defensive closeout has on their shots, it decreases the quality of their shots. It decreases their ability to score. When they increase the effectiveness of a CPU shooting while also decreasing effectiveness of the user's ability to affect that shot, it then means that your computer teammates could be in the defender's face, close out, jump with them, and absolutely do nothing. They might as well just not been there, because that shot's gonna drop 9 times out of 10. And I know a lot of y'all have come across that, and that's where that problem lies from. It has nothing to, well, it has a little bit to do with AI assignments and how those switches don't occur properly, and how the AI seems to play kind of one-sided, when it comes down to intelligence. But that's where the biggest effect of it comes from. Now, another thing I kind of want to go to is getting rid of the general tendency setting in the game. So now the tendencies on a per player basis should stay. Why? Because each player tendencies are based on what they really do. So my tendencies are based on the way I play the game, and your tendencies will be the same. Now, if they continue to look at it and say, okay, we got these general tendencies, and the general tendencies, if you look at it on any setting, doesn't go above 50. Okay, it doesn't change, it just stays at 50. And so in reality, even though this player has a tendency of going inside and finishing at the rim than they do at shooting the three, that the way the game does that math is that it'll say, okay, this player has a 70% chance, their tendencies are 70% of the time they'll try to finish inside. Okay, but because of that tendency slider being at 50, that changes that 70 to a 45. So players on your team who's supposed to cut to the basket will not cut to the basket as often as they would normally cut to the basket. But the stupid things that they would do will still be there. Alfred Payton on my team and Drew Holiday on my team, it could be a close game, 12 seconds left in the game, and they're going to throw a oop to Anthony Davis. They'll throw a oop to me. Like, why are you throwing oops when we're up 1? And then what that oop does, that joint flies over everybody and go right out of bounds. So, that's another discussion. We'll talk about that later. But so those are two key points of creating a skills gap. So the biggest step right here is eliminating player sliders. I'm sorry, but I can't think of in any sense, in any situation, in any world, in any game where player sliders make sense. Now, there are certain sliders that make sense, which is the attribute sliders, okay? So, and the reason why they make sense is because attribute sliders really more so dictate how effective a person's attribute is, as opposed to how effective, the chances that they're going to shoot a three-pointer and make it. It really affects those attributes, the impact that those attributes have on their game. So I don't mind seeing those sliders still in there, because those sliders are, they're kind of game changers when it comes down to tweaking the game. But when you look at these sliders, the player sliders, the user sliders, they go down as you play on higher difficulty, which is penalizing the player for challenging his or herself. In my career, you can either choose to play NBA games, rec games, or park games. Now, because of these sliders, because of these user sliders, shooting doesn't become about skill, it's about environment. And I'm gonna give you an example. In Jordan Rec or in Pro-Am, the reduction of the player sliders means challenging a shot is gonna hurt you if you're not willing to risk jumping every time. Now, somebody sit up here and tell me that, you don't need to jump, you just gotta close out. You already know that you can get a heavily contested closeout and they'll still get a good shot. It won't be a green, but it'll go in. And I don't have a problem with those shots going in. What I have a problem with is the math that gets done in the game behind the scenes that chooses whether or not that shot's going in. So if you decide to take these sliders out the game, okay, or leave them stuck at 50-50 all the way up and down the board, then every possession will be decided on skill on the stick. So I'm gonna give you an example. If you take the sliders out all together, now if I have a block/shot contest rating of 80, and I'm checking a shooter with a 3-point rating of 80, then at that point it's gonna come down to whether I close out and jump well enough on time to close his green window or adjust his green window versus his or her ability to nail that window regardless of the situation. So if I'm closing out on you, then you have to either release quicker or you have to hold it and get it up a little higher. I'm not saying change the control scheme so that way, like if you holding back and then you flick the left stick, he gonna arc the shot up a little higher. No, what I'm saying is that the way you hold it should be based on whether when you release it should be based on the parameters of whether the defender's closing out on you. Does it change your shot? Does it adjust your shot? Right now, it doesn't adjust your shot. Doesn't change your green window. Your green window sits in the same spot every single time. So unless a person blocks that shot and you hit that green, it's still going to be going in, and it didn't take any adjustments to make that happen. So right now the game punishes defenders, and I know for some of those who are just shooters, you could care less. But with the system that I'm covering, with the system that I'm putting in place, the very best shooters can lay claim to being the very best shooters, because it becomes more of a game of skill versus a game of luck. Now in basketball, there is luck involved, but you want to be able to fall back always on your true skill on the sticks. So in a fighting game, you get lucky and get a couple good hits off and start a chain, or you happen to get a counter at the right time when you're getting beat and you can start a chain and get back into the fight. But it does involve a little bit of luck in that instance. Okay, it does involve a little bit of luck, and I'm not taking away the luck factor, but I want to reduce the luck factor. Right now 2K is like, I say, good 40% luck, and I want to step away from the 40% luck and make it more so skills gonna matter first, and then luck comes into play at the end, because we can create better competition, better games, we can create a better environment, and ultimately that's what I look for. I'm looking to have a better environment when it comes down to playing 2K. I generally have fun, but I feel that the luck factor is too big of a marker to actually say that there is a skill factor. So if the game is rebalanced and these sliders are removed in that aspect, at least when it comes down to player versus player environments, then we can have a game that has a better balanced structure, where regardless of how long you play the game, it's not about how you learn the cheese moves quick. It's about how quick you can become accustomed to the game's rules, the game structure, the controls, and how well you can master those controls. Once you can do that, having the ability to pull off the moves that you should be able to pull off within this environment would then repurpose itself. Being able to play defense and not be punished for playing what you look at and say is this solid defense, that's going to help create that skills gap from the pure stretches all the way to the lockdown defenders. I don't like that you get a boost to shooting all around regardless of what your build is, but on defense it's really non-existent to play it. I can understand why people create so many pure offensive scoring builds, because there's no punishment for having an offensive build, but there's a lot of punishment when you have a defensive build, you know. So all my lockdowns, they know this, they know that for a factor. But those are my thoughts. I'm looking forward to hearing y'all. Let me know down in the comments below what you think is going to help create a skills gap, and whether or not you feel that we could see one come if they really break down the game and understand where the skills are coming from, where the skills needs to be implemented. This your boy JuKIng the Boss. I'm going to catch you guys on the next one. Stay tuned. I got more coming out. Peace.